is this recent rally a bear trap or if it is a resuming bull? Now, what do I mean by a bear trap is that we saw that the market start to make its V-shaped recovery somewhere in the beginning of October as it move up, and you're drawn to making a purchase right now, say for example, and suddenly the market make a inverted V-shape, and its objective is to break below this recent low. And when that happened, it became a bear trap. And let's clear this up. And what do I mean by a resuming bull? Now, is the resuming bull is as the market move up and as it comes down, retracement, you get into the market, say for example, and it resume this bull market, and its objective is to break the recent all-time high. And that's what I mean by resuming bull. And this is what we're going to discuss today. And we are going to study both its technical and fundamental reasons, and subsequently to derive if it is going to be a bear trap or could it be a resuming bull. And I hope that this tutorial, it will be helpful in enabling you to read into the market with greater clarity. And I've started this trading series. The purpose is for trading into longevity. So last week we discussed about buy strategy. Today we're going to discuss about the sell strategy. And these strategies shared, they all can be applied to most markets and in different time frame. For today's curriculum, we're going to go straight into the sell strategy. And there are two parts to it. First, we're going to discuss about the long term, and we're going to look into this weekly chart of the Dow Jones market. And we're going to study into the fundamental, what's going there, and could it be a confirmation with the technical as well? So we're going to look into both the fundamental and technical. Then as for the short term, we're going into the studying of the minutes chart, which is the 60 minutes chart. And we are mindful about the fundamental reason on the weekly, but we're going to study in detail about the technical. Is there any trading opportunity? Then after that, towards the end, I'm going to give you my conclusion. If the market, based on the analysis, could it be a bear trap or could it be a resuming bull? But before that, let's take some time to read into the disclaimer box down here. All right, let's get started on the first part, the long term, the fundamental. And on this date, 14 December 2021, it was a very important date. Fed mentioned and announced that inflation is no longer transitory. And just right before that, for many months, Fed has mentioned that inflation was transitory. It means that after the lockdown, people are back on the street and inflation is picking up, but they assure that inflation is just for short term, transitory. But on this date itself, 14 December and after, when they announced that, it gave a very clear signal to the market that 2022, and now we're looking at it, maybe even in 2023, that inflation will be still rising. It means that interest rate will be still picking up. And of course, with that, it is always a bad news for the stock market. Now, let's discuss that if the technical also confirms that as well. So in 2023, we have to keep observing if on the fundamental front, if the inflation is still on the rise. If inflation is still on the rise, it means that interest rate will be still on the rise. But is the technical confirming that? Now, let's recap on what we have learned the last session, and this session will be the same but reversed. Now, let's look at the fundamental to understand this sell strategy. Now, in order to identify a sell strategy, first, we have to identify its uptrend. Yes, you are hearing me correct. Here is that in order to identify the sell strategy, first, we have to clearly identify where is the uptrend. Now, let's recap back. Here is that there are two rules to identify uptrend. Number one is that we have to find at least 3 significant troughs. When I say at least 3 significant troughs, it means that the more is all right. If you can find 4 or 5, it is okay. Now, after we have identified these at least 3 significant troughs, the next thing that we have to do is we try to find and connect them to its best fit. So now let's try to do this. Then later on, we're going to go into the sell strategy. Now, this is a weekly chart for micro E-mini Dow Jones futures. And let's look at this trend line. Now, first we have to start a point. We have to find a point to get started. And then what we could do here is we have to find at least 3 significant troughs to identify this nice uptrend. And then we're going to find the best fit. And what I'm doing here is to find the best fit here. Now, as you could see that I'm pretty satisfied with this uptrend before 2022 here, that there was 1 trough, 2, 3 nicely seated on this uptrend line. And earlier you could see how I adjust to its best fit. And this is the 4th point. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we could identify that this is a very classic uptrend line over a span of about 2 years, from 2022 to 2021. Then we saw that there was a fundamental reason. We just mentioned that. And on the 3rd week of 2021, on the 3rd week of January, because of this bad news, the market technically also reacted to it, and it sent a clear signal that on the 3rd week of January 2021, it sent a very clear signal technically that it broke below, that you could see how nicely this bearish body is like. It broke below this very classic uptrend line, and from then the rest is history. It just continued to move with a lower high and a lower low. Now, so technically that's what we're seeing here, and combine both together, we got to keep track of both fundamental and technical, and we're going to come back to that very shortly. Now let's look at the sell strategy here. Is that the sell strategy is that there are 2 parts to it. First, it has to break below its classic uptrend line, which is it did. And now number 2 is that my preference is to sell on retracement. Now later during the minutes chart or the 60 minutes chart, we're going to go through more example. Now when it broke this downtrend or this uptrend line, it broke. Now what do I mean by sell on retracement? My preference is, as it broke, as we could see, my preference is to sell on retracement. Let me just use this instead. My preference is to sell on retracement like this. Sell on retracement like this. Now, could it be another retracement? We will come back to this again very shortly. Let's move over to our next part, and we're going to discuss about the short term. And what's the fundamental reason that since the early October market has been moving up? And one of the reasons I believe that is because of the inflation numbers has been taming a little bit, and for that reason, the market watcher are saying that perhaps the interest rate rise will not be that kind of massive interest rate rise. It will be a little bit more gentle, but that doesn't mean that interest rate will not rise. It's just that it's no longer we're seeing that the massive height on interest rate. Let's look at the technical reason right now. But before that, what we're looking here is that we're starting into the micro E-mini Dow Jones. And the first part on the buy strategy, we discussed about the E-mini Dow Jones. So today is the micro E-mini Dow Jones. So basically is 1/10 the size smaller than the E-mini Dow Jones. So I always advocate that when we trade a contract, we must always understand what we're trading. So now, how to understand about these micro E-mini Dow Jones? First, we have to understand what is the most minimum fluctuation. It states that 1 index point is worth 50 cents US dollars. It means that every 10 points is equal to 5 US dollars. It means that every 100 points, it is 50 US dollars. Now, how is this important? Because it will help me to track my profit and my potential losses. Now, each time 100 points profit, it means 50 US dollars for me. So now I've included more details and example below. You can read more into it. Now let's apply what we have learned earlier on this minutes chart, which is the 60 minutes chart. So when we look into minutes chart, so definitely I believe that you are a trader. Now I still remember what the two rules on this 60 minutes chart. Let's look at the chart here. First, you have to find a point, and I'm going to connect these few points together, and we could see that the market is so beautiful. And we could see that there was one significant trough, 2 and 3 at least, so that make it a classic uptrend line. And at the moment it's still behaving really well. Now, when will be the time that I may see that they maybe have a sell strategy is that when the market, now you could see that it behaved very nicely on this uptrend line. So earlier I mentioned that for sell strategy, before that they must have a nice uptrend line. So we saw that there's uptrend line. Now along the way it may still continue to trend, maybe forming the fourth trough. Now let's say, for example, the market break below this beautiful uptrend line, and when it retraces, now my preference is always sell on retracement, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm suggesting that if it happens structurally, it's happened. So this will be the point that this point will be a point of selling signal here, sell on retracement. But of course, that's my personality and that's my preference. I always like to sell on retracement, but the downside of selling on retracement is that sometimes you will miss a trade. But I guess it's alright, because if we carry an abundance mindset, if I miss out this trade, there's always better trade. There are always many other trades ahead. So that's the technical reason for the 60 minutes chart. Now there's one feature I like about the platform I'm using here. If you could look at the top section here, can you see that there was an auto Fibo? These are auto trend as well. So now sometimes it does helps me to identify all this trend. Now let me just do this. I click on the trend, and you will see that it is suggesting the color lines. They are the system that suggests that where are the trend. Now happen that is quite straightforward, but sometimes it may not be that clear where's the trend right now, where's the sell strategy. But before the sell strategy, we have to identify a classic uptrend line that we could see that the green line is their suggestion that this is that's the system. They suggest that there is an uptrend here that you can take then as a reference. So I think it's pretty helpful, and I also include more information below. You can read into it as well. Before I give you my conclusion if this market is a bear trap or a resuming bull, let's look at the daily chart of Dow Jones. And on this date, on the 10th of October, overnight gain, it was at about 1,200 points, and it was the largest gain of the last 2 years. Now what happened was that the October CPI at 7.7%, it was slightly lower than expectation, about 8.2, and for that reason the market rallied. Now let us just go back to a little bit of history here, that the inflation started to pick up at the end of 2021, and before that, over the last 40 years, the inflation mainly stayed below an upper band of about 3%. That's about over the last 40 years. Now, so even at 7.7%, the inflation is still double the size of what it should be. So I would say that at this point, the risk on inflation and higher interest rate, it is still there. Now let's go back to the weekly chart, and let's go to the conclusion. Let's go back to the weekly chart. And what we're seeing here, and what we've discussed at the beginning of this tutorial, is that this uptrend line, it is still valid, and the fundamental reason it is still valid at 7.7% is double the size of what it should be on inflation, and it has broken in the first place. The CPI became a very important number for this season. Do keep a lookout on the future CPI numbers, and if it is continuing on the rise, and also the chart react accordingly. And I would say that the tendency of a bear trap at this point in time is likely compared to a resuming bull. Do follow me on my next quarterly live webinar. You can find the sign up link below. Also, if you enjoy researching the markets and its opportunity with some help from a platform like mine, you can apply the discount code provided below. We will continue this trading series, Trading into Longevity, next week with more market insights and strategies. Feel free to leave any comments below. I would love to exchange ideas with you. And for more market insights and tutorial, I hope to see you again very, very, very soon. Thank you for staying true, and you have many great trading weeks ahead.